a totes i a tots en aquesta quarta edició del Cafè Europa. Espero que ens pugueu acompanyar aquest matí, tot just fent un cafè i compartint amb els nostres ponents d'avui i amb tots vosaltres un debat interessant. Un debat pel qual hem convidat dues persones que treballen a Brussel·les, el Marc Botenga, que és eurodiputat, i l'Isabel Yglesias, que representa l'Associació d'Indústries de Cleaning a nivell europeu, raó per la qual farem la sessió en anglès. Per tant, welcome everyone. Happy to be here with you. My name is Albert Royo. I represent Horitzó Europa in this joint event organized by the Fundació Catalunya Europa and Horitzó Europa. As I said, we're going to devote this session to discuss on the European Commission's proposal to create a European framework for a minimum wage in Europe. We have two brilliant speakers with us. So I hand over to Pau, who will introduce you to the two speakers. So Pau, over to you.
Okay, moltes gràcies, Albert. Bon dia a tothom i benvinguts al Cafè Europa, també en nom de la Fundació Catalunya Europa. Good morning and welcome to Cafè Europa, our monthly meeting with European politics, usually in Catalan, today in English, and today on an extremely important issue such as the European Minimum Wage Directive. Among other questions, today we will address the ability of this directive to improve working conditions and to ensure a decent living, especially of low-income workers. As you all know, today we are going to discuss the Minimum Wage Directive with Marc Botenga, member of the European Parliament, and Isabel Yglesias, Executive Director of the EFCI, the European Federation representing the cleaning and facility services industry. Marc Botenga, let me admit everyone. Okay. Marc Botenga is from Belgium. He's member of the Parti du Travail, the Workers' Party of Belgium, and belongs to the left group in the European Parliament, composed of left-wing and far-left parties. Marc Botenga studied law in Brussels and has become more and more involved in politics, especially through social activism. After 20 years of activism, he got involved in European politics, first as a political advisor of the European Left Group and later as an elected MEP. In fact, he's member of the European Parliament since 2019, the last European elections. He's especially active in two committees, the Committee of Industry, Research and Energy and the Committee of Unemployment and Social Affairs. And before handing over to Marc, I would like to give some methodological information. As you know, we only have 1 hour, so everything has to be short and quick. And after this introduction, which we always would like to keep shorter than we actually do, I'm going to hand over to Marc, and he will talk for about 20 minutes. And after Marc's presentations, I will introduce Isabel Yglesias, who's going to talk for another 5 to 10 minutes. And after her, I will bounce back to Marc in order to agree, discuss, reject Isabel's main points. After that, we will open a short Q&A with the rest of the audience. This is how it works, okay? Let me remind you that we only accept written questions sent through the chat. So please do not hesitate to write in Catalan or in Spanish. We can translate them for you, or at least we will try so. Ho repeteixo en català perquè li quedi clar a tothom. Podeu fer les preguntes en català o en castellà. Nosaltres intentarem traduir-les com bonament puguem. Per tant, no us faci cap angúnia posar les preguntes en català. El que és més important és que les feu, efectivament. Okay, enough from my side. Marc, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the organization of the event and for the invitation, because I think it is an important topic. It's a very, how would I say, timely discussion as well, because we have started now the discussions in Parliament and obviously also in parallel in the Council on the initial proposal of the European Commission for a directive on what they call a European minimum wage, and then we will discuss if this is actually what is there or not. But at least this is the way the directive is framed or is proposed, presented in general. Now, Before going into the directive, and there's I think 2 points out of the directive we can have a good and an interesting discussion about. Maybe a little bit of context on. You will notice that I'm a critical supporter of the directive. That is, I do think that it is good that it is there, but I do have a lot of questions and remarks on. How would I say, on the content of it. Now, first of all, why do I think the initiative is good? This has been something we've been discussing for a long time. And one of the criticisms we have throughout Europe of the European Union is that from a worker's perspective, very often the European Union has meant lower wages, more flexibility, less pensions, and so on. You know, this has been generally when the European Commission came with recommendations, or the Council, I mean, within the European semester, so this European governance framework. Very often this has been, okay, you need to work a little bit longer. We need to, you know, increase the pension age. We need to have more flexible working contracts. You've seen the reforms, I know, also in Spain, of the labor market, and so on. And so very often trade union organizations and workers have perceived this, and in my opinion, correctly so, as pushing into one direction, where the words of social Europe, the promises of social Europe, which came from the 90s, Jacques Delors, who put that on the table, were mainly, let's say, rhetoric and very little concrete proposals. Now, since we have had the European Pillar of Social Rights, which has been adopted, so which gives some principles, let's say, of what more social politics of policies at European level should look like. But at the same time, it's, you know, it's a list of some good intentions, some better, some worse. But it's important here to have a concrete proposal to be able to discuss and to see, okay, can Europe actually contribute? Can the European Union contribute to increasing or to leveling up wages throughout Europe, which is the opposite of one of the topics I've always been very involved in, which is social dumping. Where you have seen that because of a lack of first rules and then afterwards the implementation of certain rules, there have been, let's say, a lot of situations in different countries, and I don't want to specify certain countries, where workers have come from other member states without getting the same rights, and then putting a pressure on the wage system in national states. Now, if we look at the context, I think there's a second element which is important, which is the one of the two big crises we have now seen. We have now lived. The first one, of course, the one we remember, is the 2008-2012, let's say, crisis, so the financial crisis, that has been followed throughout Europe by a number of austerity measures that have had a very negative impact on wages generally. Of course, this differs across member states. I'm not going to repeat that every single time, because we know that. But generally, if you had at the time 1 out of 7 workers that, although having a job, did not make it to the end of the month or were at risk of poverty, today, today it's 1 in 10. So we have an increase of workers that have problems, which is, you know, not something you can accept. We've also had this this year, unfortunately, you know, last year, 2020, you know, that the European Union fixed an objective to get 20 million people out of poverty, and that we failed to achieve this objective. So this is I think one cluster of issues related to the economic crisis of 2008, 2012, that has been in a big part has negatively reflected on workers' wages. Secondly, there's of course now the COVID crisis. Now the COVID crisis, the virus, and I like to put it this way as a bit of a figure of speech, to say the COVID virus, basically the coronavirus, is a class virus. It does not, contrary to what we generally hear, it does not affect all people in the same way. It's a virus that has hit throughout the world, but also in Europe, first and foremost, the working class. Why? Very often because they were not able to go to teleworking arrangements. And this we have seen in many countries, that the people that were teleworking, they had one advantage, at least, that they were a little bit more protected from the virus. While many people, we've talked about the slaughterhouses in Germany, we have talked about cleaning staff throughout Europe, we have talked about garbage collectors and so on. And still today, if we look at the clusters of the virus, the main, how would I say, the main sectors, and in Belgium, this is up to 40% of virus clusters that are in companies, come from workers, let's say, and very often labor-intensive sectors. Now, this means that we've all applauded the heroes of the Corona crisis, at least in Belgium, and I know in a number of other countries. But today, I think it's time for a pay raise as well for them. Because of course, if you're you cannot eat applause. So I think the time has come for them to get this. And I want to maybe because we're in at least virtually in Catalonia. I want to remember, or to remind something which touched me a lot during the first wave of the coronavirus, which was the initiative of the workers of SEAT in Barcelona to say, we normally make cars, but we now want to make masks and respirators. I thought that was a wonderful initiative, and really, showing that the heroes of the working class were throughout. It was not just in the hospitals, of course, in the hospitals, but also elsewhere. And so the question really is, do we think that these people need a pay rise or not? So that's the first question. And my answer obviously would be yes to this. And then I would get to the, how would I say, to the fact that does this directive, what is this going to help us to get this pay rise? That's the question throughout Europe, from Bulgaria to Belgium, because we have vastly different wages. We also have vastly different systems of fixing wages. We have, let's say, the Nordic system, which is, when I say Nordic, I mean the Scandinavian system, which is mostly based on collective bargaining. We have systems that are very different, that are more based on law. And we have systems that are a little bit mixed. The Belgian system, for example, is a little bit of a mixed system where there is a law, but at the same time, collective bargaining has a central role in this. So, as I said, within this framework, the question is, can, in one way or another, the European Union and the European Commission with this proposal help to get better wages in a situation in which wages have not followed, how would I say, for example, increases in productivity for the last 20, 30 years. Good. A minimum wage could help. A minimum wage can help. Why is minimum wage useful? Because the objective of a minimum wage is not to have everybody work at the minimum wage level. Let's make clear, it's not. The objective is not to bring everyone to, I don't know, if we have a minimum wage of a certain amount, to bring everyone to that minimum wage. The objective is to set a basis and then to have wages go up or be able to pull wages up in different countries. As you know, minimum wages today exist in almost all European countries in different forms. As I said, some of them are based on collective bargaining, like in the north. And others are more based on, how would I say, law-based systems. But they're also very different. If you look at wages, and I've got nothing against Bulgaria, but if you look at the wage system in Bulgaria, it's obviously a lot lower than it is than the minimum wage would be in Belgium, and I'm guessing in Spain. I mean, the minimum wage per hour in Bulgaria, we're speaking about 1.87 euros. As a minimum wage per hour, 1.87 euros. If you look at countries, I know in Belgium it's about 9.85, so we're close to 10. There's a campaign in Belgium to put it to 14 euros an hour. I'm not sure about Spain. I think it's about 5.7 or something. But anyway, just to illustrate that there's very big differences, and that these differences, of course, have also an influence on the economy inside Europe. But I'm sure Isabel Yglesias will speak about this on the competitiveness of different companies. Now, this minimum wage directive, the first discussion that there has been a discussion on the tool. As you know, the Commission has different tools. The Commission can go, and I'll make it a little bit, I'll simplify a little bit. If you put in a regulation, it means that you regulate directly, meaning that the European Union basically says, this is the framework, this is how we want it to be, and there's no national transposition even necessary. It's the European rule. This is, let's say, I wouldn't say the most stringent, but the most stringent tool. On the other hand, you can also just have recommendations or guidelines. They are completely free. The Commission sets out guidelines and then we follow them. Now, for different reasons, I think guidelines or recommendations, they clearly would have been too free. And of course, a regulation, as you know, wages and wage formation are a national competence. I mean, at least a national competence in certain countries, then there's regional differences, but they're not a competence as such of the European Union. So this is why the European Union or the European Commission went for a directive to say the tool we need is a directive on minimum wages throughout the European Union. Okay, I think, to be honest, that's it's a good choice to go for a directive. A directive allows to set minimum standards. Okay, now this proposal, and I'm going into the proposal a little bit concretely now, and I think if you look at it, of course you should read and study it entirely, but if you want to choose some articles, I think Article 4 and Article 5 are really important articles. Why Article 5? Well, why these two articles for today? First of all, because we only have 1 hour, but secondly, because I think there's two pillars in this, or two parts of this directive, which is one, the proposal to, as I said, set minimum standards for what minimum wages should be in the European Union. And secondly, the proposal to reinforce, to strengthen collective bargaining, right? So the goal, of course, is to increase minimum wages, to improve minimum wage systems throughout the European Union. But there's two pillars, let's say, within this directive I want to focus on. Ideally, this would lead to upward convergence. Rather than downward convergence, you would have an upward convergence of wages between countries, as I said, that have very low minimum wages and countries that have higher minimum wages. And ideally as well, amongst salaries or wages that are now low, but that would increase, that are above the minimum wage, that would increase. So this would be the ideal system. Now, if we look at Article 5, or maybe first, the Commission, of course, insists a lot that it respects what it called subsidiarity. Subsidiarity, as you know, meaning that you set a framework, but you respect the competence of member states, and you also respect, in this case, then concretely, the autonomy and the freedom of social partners to do other things as long as they respect this minimum standard. Article 5 gives basically the criteria, or how would I say, the links, the framework, and the criteria that a member state should take into consideration when fixing a minimum wage. Now, these criteria, there's about 4 or 5, and it's an open list. But the ones the Commission insists upon are, of course, important. First, the purchasing power of these statutory minimum wages. So what can you actually buy with it? Secondly, the general level of wages and their distribution. So this is, how are the wages? What is the wage structure in your country? How are wages distributed, and so on. Then the growth rate of gross wages. And finally, and this is a disputable, I think, a rather disputable criterion, the labor productivity developments. Why is it disputable? For 2 reasons. First, because obviously you would look at how productivity stands now and how wages relate to that. While we know that over the last 20 years, there has been a disconnect between the increase in productivity and the increase in salaries, which has not followed. And secondly, because this might also, in the end, if you take that criteria, lead to lowering minimum wages. Because you could say, we don't want, as productivity decreases, we don't want salaries to go up too much. So this is it's a disputable part. There is a sentence, a phrase in the directive which says that nothing in this directive should be used to go back, to have lower minimum wages than today. So kind of a non-regression clause. But what this actually means is extremely vague. To be honest, I'm in favor of a social progress clause, but this non-regression clause, we're not sure what it really means, how far it goes, how far it doesn't go. So this is, let's say, Article 5, and we can go in the discussion a little bit if it's about what your questions are about this. What Article 5 doesn't have is a stringent reference to, let's say, the double criteria trade unions wanted, which is a minimum level of 60% of the median wage and 50% of the average wage. So these how would I say this? These two numbers have been used generally in the campaigning, saying the European Union should set as a minimum standard at least these 2 percentages. Okay. Why? Because in this way, you kind of compare, how would I say, you kind of compare the minimum wage, of course, to the other wages in your country. And once again, it's important to have both, because if you look at, I don't know, let me, I'm very much focused on Bulgaria today, but let me take Slovenia. If you look at Slovenia, of course, they're already above the 63% of the median wage, but they're not at the average wage yet. So if you look at these wage structures, country per country, it's important to have both. Okay. Now the Commission does not choose to copy this as such. There's a reference, careful and so on, but it's not as stringent as the trade unions would have liked. Let me take. So I think that it's a good point for discussion, because in the end, trade unions are very much on saying we need these 2 percentages. They're not in, and this is a bit of a disappointment, I think. And then the collective bargaining part. Now the collective bargaining part, which is mostly Article 4. If we look at, I spoke about the salaries over the last decade, but if you look at collective bargaining, since 2000, so the last 20 years, let's say, there has been a collapse in many member states of collective bargaining and the weight of collective bargaining. It has fallen, let's say, I mean, of course, we all remember Greece, which is not that didn't happen spontaneously. But if you look at Romania and so on, so here the Commission basically starts to propose to come closer to this 70% of minimum coverage for collective bargaining agreements. Okay, so at least 70% should be covered. 70% of the workers, of course, should be covered by collective bargaining agreements. To be honest, in Belgium, this would not make a big difference, because in Belgium we are at over 90%. But in other countries, I think, okay, in Greece, I think they're at 25% right now. In Romania and Bulgaria, it's also around 20-25% somewhere. So for those countries, this would actually mean a real reinforcement of collective bargaining. Now, the objective of this in all member states, it is that with high collective bargaining coverage, you generally have a lower proportion, a lower part of low wage workers. You have lower wage inequality, and you have generally higher minimum wages. So this is the philosophy behind, let's say, this two-part structure of saying, of course, we want higher statutory minimum wages, but we also want to reinforce collective bargaining within the limitations of course, what the European Union can do as a how would I say, competence-wise and respecting the subsidiarity principle. Now, I've given one criticism. Let me also tell you, but I'm sure you're aware that there's another criticism coming from Nordic trade unions, which are very, let's say, scared, not troubled, worried about the fact that this directive might weaken the autonomy they have during collective bargaining. So this is their, but in the end, the European Trade Union Confederation came to an agreement, came to a common position. This was without a doubt not easy, but they did. So I hope that we will also in Parliament come to a good agreement. As you know, discussions have just started. We got the proposal from the Commission. We now have rapporteurs in the Ample Committee and so on. So, but how would I say? It will not be easy. This is for sure. But the challenge is high, because if even in this context of crisis and of social crisis that is going to come, we are not able to offer some kind of step forward, it's going to be extremely perceived extremely negatively by workers throughout Europe. But this means that we need to focus on, in my opinion, two things. First, that the directive actually gets somewhere. But secondly, that we get a directive that actually has some impact, some effect. Because if you have a directive in the end that changes nothing, and you present it as the big directive of social Europe, the big directive of minimum wages, finally, because this is how the media speak about it, European minimum wage. But in the end, the worker will look at, okay, what is getting in my pocket? Not just in a net salary, but as a gross salary as well. What is going to happen to our social security systems? What is going to happen to consumption and so on? So in this sense, I see two big risks. First, if you read the proposal, and I'll conclude on this, you can see that there is the Commission has chosen to move very, very carefully. There was the contradictions among member states. There's the pressure on the one hand from Business Europe and others that didn't want the directive at all. And then there's the pressure of trade unions that wanted a directive and a much more, let's say, stringent directive than what is now proposed. So the Commission clearly has moved very, very carefully. And I think in the end, what will make the difference is who will push harder, who will have more effect in the negotiations. Will that be, we have the clash between Business Europe and the trade unions, we're aware of that, but also with the national systems to say, okay, which arrangement can we find amongst the 2 or 3 different types, and I'm not going in all of them, but of national systems that all want to an extent to protect their national system. And can we find a compromise that actually does something for the workers and at the same time reassures people that the good elements of their national system will not be touched? With this, I think I have exhausted my time, so I will stop here. And thanks a lot. Looking forward to discussion.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Marc. I'm pretty sure that the audience will have some questions after that. The questions can be written from now on the chat. We will grab them for you and translate them. Before opening the discussion, let me introduce Isabel Yglesias, who will say some words from a different perspective, that of the facility services industry. Isabel Yglesias is also a lawyer, like you are. She studied in Barcelona. She specialized in European law in Strasbourg and Brussels, and has lots of master's degrees. She interned in the European Parliament and as a Blue Book trainee in the second generation of the European Commission. After that, she practiced European competition law for over 3 years in the Spanish law firm Uría Menéndez, and then moved to DG Comp, competition, where she worked for 7 years in antitrust and mergers control and state aid control in the services sector. And since 2018, she is the executive director of the EFCI, the European Federation, representing the industrial and cleaning and facility services sector. So Isabel, please, your turn.
Thanks for this very kind introduction, and thanks for Marc for setting the scene for a very relevant exchange on a topic which is indeed central, I think, not only for EU employees, but of course for employers and in general for the future of the European integration, I believe, and on this I will want to talk a bit at the end of my intervention now, from a personal point of view and not only as a representative of the EFCI. Indeed, we represent the industrial cleaning service, which employs over 4 million people across the EU. Through nearly 300,000 companies. So we are a very big sector, but the points that I'm going to introduce today, a bit in response to all of what MEP Botenga has just exposed, are shared by EU employers, sectorial and cross-industry, Business Europe, to which Marc has made references a few times. This is indeed a proposal, the one we're discussing today, which is very controversial from the employer's point of view for various reasons. But I'm going to say that, and especially from our sector, of course, which is a sector that employs people in various ways and which is very much aware and linked to collective bargaining and social dialogue. It is a measure or a proposal by the Commission, which we think is very daring. MEP Botenga has just said that the Commission moved very carefully. We think that the Commission did precisely the contrary, which is to be very daring and precise and present a proposal which goes far beyond the competencies the EU currently, and I'm saying it very, very much underlying that, but currently has. So the Union, for us, currently doesn't have competencies to present such a proposal. This is something that EU employers and some member states really stick to, and which lead to our first major concern on the proposal, which is not having a legal basis to present any measure on the setting of minimum wages, but even less a directive. I mean, if we go back to the treaties, Article 153.5 says the provisions of this article shall not apply to pay, the right of association, the right to strike, or the right to impose lockouts. And what is the Commission proposing? The Commission is proposing measures to set wages that really interfere with the way this is done, and this has been done for ages successfully in many member states, and our sector is the very good example for that. In the countries where strong social partners work and exist, we have reached very good salaries in a sector which employs mainly lower skilled Asians, and we have got to successes like having being one of the first sectors, for instance, in equaling the minimum wages in Eastern and Western Germany. So we are the living proof, so to say, that the systems work in many EU member states, and when they work, it is clear that the functioning systems need to be respected, and they need to ensure that the negotiation of wages is done at the closest level possible to companies and employees, and that is, of course, the social partners. But we believe that the proposal of the Commission really goes in the wrong direction in this sense, and that the choice of the legal basis is really a mistake that will, moreover, and that is something that MEP Botenga has nearly got to talk about. We believe that this is very problematic from the very beginning because it will lead to legal uncertainty. And legal certainty is one of the main factors to ensure social, economic progress and ensure employment, and of course having positive consequences on wage setting, which is, and I mean, in the general context, I would say that it needs to be clear that the EU employers fully support the final objectives of the proposal in terms of getting to really a Europe that really converges in social terms. But we believe that this is really not the right tool. Then also, I mean, we really think that the choice of the tool, a directive, may be really counterproductive. And here I add a bit of a pinch of salt on a personal capacity. Even like the name of this event today, an EU minimum wage. Well, a directive will not create an EU minimum wage. The competences of the Commission are not those. This will create, we believe, moreover, false expectations into European employees and workers, and in general in the European citizenship. And we believe that this may cause even more detachment. I think that it is really, I'm trying to provoke a bit the discussion here, but we need to call things by its own name. Here, what the Commission is trying to do is to propose solutions for member states where collective bargaining is not happening, where social partners are not strong, but they are doing so, we would say in Spanish, starting the house from the roof, so to say, so really from an approach which is not the right one, forgetting about the autonomy of social partners, and moreover, using terminology which is not adequate to what we may lead in the end. So European employers think that really what should have been proposed here would be tackled recommendations in the framework of the EU semester, with brave proposals for the countries, for the member states where this is not happening. Because we are now trying to solve with a measure, an overarching measure for 27 member states to solve the problems of certain member states. And this will lead to a lot of problems and, in my personal opinion, to a big detachment of the opinion in the general opinion of EU citizenship. So this is really a concern for us. Also, this proposal will have a direct effect on the autonomy of social partners. While we welcome the intention to further recognize the role of social partners in wage setting, making it binding, as it would result from Article 4 of the proposal, which MEP Botenga was mentioning, it is really an interference on the autonomy of social partners and on the freedom to choose whether or not to affiliate to both unions and employers' organizations. And of course, this will have consequences in terms of how to impose it, how member states will develop or transpose the directive, and we really have a lot of concerns about it. And finally, we also have big concerns about whether this proposal will end up in really not respecting statutory minimum wages in systems which are really functioning like the Nordic member states, etc. I think I can still talk for a couple of minutes. Mr. Botenga made a first question, which is, and to which I would like to reply, which is, can the EU contribute to increasing salaries? Can the EU do that effectively? Yes, we believe, and I believe personally that yes, that the EU can contribute it, but how? Not by imposing it through an overarching directive, which many member states are not happy with, which many social partners are very critical with. It is shown by the amount of discussions that had to be found in Egypt, in the employees federation, to get to an agreement on how to face this really interfering directive. And moreover, from a sectorial point of view, we are very worried that it has not been taken into account. Which effects will such a directive have on sectors like ours, in which in some countries things are working fantastically, while in others what needs to be done is to really build capacity building and help establish this social dialogue. Because basically we think, of course, for social dialogue, it takes two to tango, so to say. And this cannot be created just by European legislation, which in the end we believe does not respect the principle of subsidiarity. I see that Pau is already concerned about time, so I stop here and I'll be happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Isabel. We bounce back to Marc. He can reply. He can, well, say anything he wants. Please make it short, very short. We have some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'll be very short. I mean, I think Isabel gave a very good overview of the disagreements. Now, no, what I think is important is, first of all, I do trust the Commission to at least know their legal basis. I generally don't agree with the Commission, but I do think that regarding legal certainty, this is for me an argument to introduce the 60% and the 50%. At least it would be sure and clear for everyone. There would not be any, how would I say, weird criteria which we don't know exactly what are going to be in the thing. So if either EFCI or Business Europe could support this 50% of the average wage and 60% of the median wage, as a rule, that would be great in the name of legal certainty. Secondly, no, I'm kidding, of course, but I think as such as legal certainty, that would actually be a good way to do it. Regarding maybe something else, I don't think, I mean, there's obviously, let's not hide the diverging economic interests behind a legal discourse. So Isabel Yglesias is right to say that, of course, Business Europe wants social convergence in Europe. But this is something else than say we want upward social convergence. Because clearly many member states, the member associations of Business Europe, so of the, let's say the entrepreneurs federations, they generally oppose wage increases. And so by opposing, you know, we have the debate now in Belgium, we've had the debate in France and so on, where they are like, no, we can especially not increase wages. So it's I think we need to be honest about the fact that there's a discussion on should wages increase or not. And then there's the way of how to do it. Regarding collective bargaining, I would be, you know, I'm very much in favor of collective bargaining. It's very important in Belgium. It's very important in a number of other countries, and it needs to be strengthened. And I'm happy that the Commission now takes an initiative that goes in that direction, because it has taken for 10 years initiatives that went in the opposite direction. In Greece and in other countries, it has basically destroyed collective bargaining with its recommendations through the austerity package in order to push wages down. Now, I'm very much happy to hear that someone like Isabel Yglesias is defending collective bargaining, and also that Business Europe put out a paper saying how important collective bargaining systems are. But when these were destroyed, when these were being weakened to push down wages, I did not hear a strong voice of protest by Business Europe. In 2015, when in Greece these were broken and the coverage of collective bargaining agreements was destroyed, Business Europe did not go down in the street to say this is unacceptable, Greek workers deserve better wages and better collective bargaining. So in this sense, I think there's an economic divergence of economic interest. There's people that want higher wages. I think that's a good idea, and that want to get a directive that works and would push in this direction. And then we have all the criticisms on the directive. And then there's a debate, then there's positions that say, okay, higher wages right now is not a good idea, you know, and then we can have a discussion, you know, but these are two different discussions. So I wouldn't want to mix both discussions. And I understand the employer's perspective. I, of course, do not share it, but I understand politically that they say, you know, we don't want higher wages increased, because if otherwise, for legal certainty perspective, I would say let's take the 60% and the 50%. So I'll stop there, not to go further, and to be able to discuss the actual points of the questions of the participants.
Thank you so much, Marc. Indeed, we have several questions being put by our audience. We have, I'll try to gather a first round of questions with 3 types of questions, or 3 questions put by our audience. First of all, Xavier Marcos, he is asking, how does the directive take into account the challenge of work automatization that will reduce the need of human workforce? Is it somehow enshrined in the concept of productivity increase? That would be one question. Second question from Mireia, what is the stance of the main member states on this issue? and what can be the calendar ahead once it's being discussed in Parliament. And then Jordi Martí also puts a couple of questions. Mrs. Yglesias states that the bargaining system is working in every member state. Do member states have a key role in this? In a global world where Inditex and big corporations in general hire more workers in Morocco or Bangladesh than in the European Union, what is the role of member states and collective bargaining in the 21st century? And he ends with a statement basically saying that the directive is very nice, maybe very nice, but doesn't help to guarantee jobs in Europe. While we think in productivity, companies can keep delocalizing their productivity overseas. So over to you, Marc and Isabel. Please do answer with short replies so that we can have a second round of questions. Thank you. Isabel?
Sorry, now, great. Thanks for this summary of all these questions. I've taken a pinch of each of them. Regarding automatization, digitalization, and whether the commission, the proposal is taking into account all of this, we believe that no, this wouldn't be also the tool to do that, but the Commission is actually being very active. We can discuss that at another stage. I'm happy to answer questions on this. The Commission is putting a lot of effort in through other means, like all the digital economy package, etc. And also what is important is, I would say, the focus of the Commission in skills. That is something that the European employers is putting a lot of emphasis on, and from instance, from the cleaning sector, we are really focusing on really hiring and recognizing the development of basic skills for our employees, digital skills, linguistic skills, green skills. This is coming, this is happening. The European Commission is trying to help member states, employers and employees in developing that. And so there are many tools that will come. I would put your attention into the Pact for Skills. And we think that this is a tool that is really important to really help increasing salaries, increasing productivity, and really fostering these social conversions, but that it is unfortunately not the objective and not focused in this proposal for a directive. Then I heard that one of the questions said, one of the persons who was putting the question was saying that I said that the collective bargaining, that social dialogue is working in every member state. Well, no, I didn't say that. It is working in many member states, and it's working really well and setting very good results. The problem is that we believe that this proposal will interfere with these very well functioning systems. Actually, just to put it very clearly as an example, last week in the debate, the first debate on the proposal in the Parliament, the rapporteur, Mr. Radke, precisely said that this report, that this proposal is not aimed at the well functioning wage setting systems, and he said in Austria or in Scandinavia, and I'm reading that, but rather to complement member states without such systems. Well, then clearly, is a directive the right tool to tackle the problems of some countries? Is building exceptions in member states in which well-functioning systems have provided excellent results regarding wages the best tools that the union has to improve wage setting systems in other member states? Well, no. And the same goes with capacity building. We have been involved in capacity building exercises. Our peers here in Brussels do a lot of capacity building exercises in member states where there's less social partner tradition. And really, as I was saying, it takes two to tango. It is very difficult to build from top to down successful collective bargaining systems. And this is where it all should have started. Then last but not least, how the question about globalization, the world of multinationals and wage settings, there I would say there is a tool that exists and that is very functional, which on top of course, all the national systems and all of what the EU is doing in terms of social affairs, which are the works councils that are the forums where multinationals and employers' organizations are discussing wages at global level and multinational policies at global level, and they are very important tools to which employers also attach a lot of importance. So that's a tool to be looked at. And I stop here because I could continue, but thanks a lot.
Marc, please.
Yes. Okay. Also, very quickly then to the different questions. The matter of productivity increases. So they now put in the criterion, as I said, or they suggest the criterion of productivity. So a link between productivity and wages. I'm not particularly happy about that because, as I explained before, I see a big risk in that. However, you could say that then if there's a productivity increase, salaries should follow. And of course, automatization or robotization or whatever would lead or should lead to an increase in productivity. This is also the entire debate about the redistribution or the reduction of working time. You know, so this is all a matter of who is going to benefit from digitalization. Is it going to be the worker and his salary, or is it going to be more dividends for the shareholders, to put it very schematically? Regarding the member states, of course, the Nordic countries are by and large against it, this proposal. Other countries are much more in the middle, but there is no official council position yet. I mean, it's not like, you know, the council would then make an aggregation of the different stances of the member states. So this we do not have yet, like we don't have an official EP, a European Parliament position yet. Of course, you know that France and Germany recently introduced some extra minimum wage in certain sectors, especially. So you can think that there's more openness there, of course, than there would be in the Nordic countries. But this, as I said, there's no official council position yet. On the legal basis, however, the council legal service has said it was okay. So the council legal service is more with the commission than it is. There is some nuance, I know, but still, it has not said that it's a completely illegal directive. No, I want to maybe make one point, which I think is important because it comes back in the question on bargaining systems throughout Europe, and also a little bit in what Isabel Yglesias just said. Is if the problem is more important in certain countries than in others, is that should we then have a directive for all countries? You know, so if it's mainly if one system works well and two other systems work badly, should we then not use the directive because it's only for those two countries where it doesn't work properly? Now, I would say you do need a directive, and let me take an example of tax evasion. Now, tax evasion, we know that there are certain countries in Europe that are, let's say, considered tax havens, okay, where companies go because they pay very low taxes there, okay. Now, if you say it's only a problem in certain countries, so we don't need, the European Union doesn't need to do anything about tax evasion because it's not a problem in this country. It's only a problem in, I don't know, Luxembourg. No, we need a European approach to be able to make sure that we don't have, how would I say, either cherry picking or we don't have like holes in our boat, you know? And this is the same thing with wages. We don't want to have, how would I say, just recommendations in one country where wages would stay low. No, we want to have a European approach where we avoid this competition. And so, yes, like certain problems are more important in certain countries than in others, but we need a European approach to make sure that they're not played one against the other. So I think this is more an argument to say, let's take a directive so that the problem goes away everywhere in Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. There are still some questions on the table. You have talked lots about productivity. I will not add another question on that. But there is a question on Scandinavian trade unions, specifically on its position. You said something in the early beginnings of your speech. If you could elaborate more on that. And there is another question on the average transposition period in the countries. What do you expect from this directive? And the last question, it has to be very quick, really, is about SDGs. SDG 3 and 10 are meant to reduce inequalities, promote a healthy life, and so on. Is it possible to guarantee these objectives through this directive?
Very quickly, so Scandinavian trade unions, they are very skeptical of the proposal, but they did in the end find, as I said, the compromise which is defended now by ETUC. So if you go to the website of the European Trade Union Confederation, you can see there the positions that have been able to come out as a compromise. Regarding the average transposition period, this is extremely difficult. As you know, this is generally discussed during the process as well, when it should be transposed, how much time member states are given, and so on. So I'm not going to speculate now by saying it's going to be 1 year, it's going to be 5 years. I would go for, I don't know, 2 years after the approval, just to give you an answer like this. But honestly, there's no, how would I say, we don't know. It will depend on the negotiations. And finally, the SDGs, will this help? It will help if it's an effective directive. Let's be very clear. If it does not, no. Can it help to reduce inequality between countries? Yes. In the sense that it might it might limit wage competition if you succeed in increasing wages in countries where they are extremely low now. So if you get an upward social convergence through this directive, and I'm not saying the directive in the current form is guaranteeing that, I'm not saying that, but if that would be one of the measures contributing to an upward social convergence, then yes, it might actually help to reduce, how would I say, inequality and huge inequalities between member states currently. Will it just by itself be enough? No. You will also need a strong industrial policy, which is well balanced across regions through Europe. You will also need to have, how would I say, different investments, allow for more public investment, and so on and so on. So there's no guarantee, and this tool will not be enough. Could it contribute in the right form? Yes.
If I may briefly add a couple of points. Scandinavian Union's position is clear. Our Scandinavian members, Scandinavian employers are also very much against this, because they have very good, well-functioning systems, and we just fear that the way forward for their member states' representation in the council will be to seek for exceptions to the directive. And this is what I was saying is this the right way to start building the social Europe now that we are in this focus towards the European pillar of social rights, having exceptions, having a watered down directive? Are we not just using a tool which has a certain name and a certain specificities, while what we should do is use another one? We know that it may probably end up being a framework directive, but we know that the European Commission, that the European Union has the right tools to try to enforce or try to design policies better, and that would be, of course, a council recommendation, for instance, on these topics. Transposition, normally it should be 2 years, but what I was trying to say is that what we anticipate is a lot of litigation afterwards in the transposition. And I'm being a bit provocative here again. What we are seeing with what the Commission is proposing and the amendments of the Parliament, etc., is that we may be ending up with the European Court of Justice having competencies to rule on sectoral, national, regional collective agreements. That's what this proposal is currently opening the door to, and as Catalans, so attached to subsidiarity, I think that this really is a question that needs to be well thought about. But we are really concerned about this and about what this may bring in the future. And I'm stopping here, it's 10, sorry, thanks.
Thank you so much, Isabel. That would be very interesting scene to see. Thank you on behalf of Fundació Catalunya Europa and on behalf of Horitzó Europa. Thank you to Marc and Isabel for this very interesting discussion. We have learned a lot, and we have learned that there is a very interesting process going on in the European Parliament and in the Council. As Teresa Carrera put it, happy Europe Day that we're going to be celebrating in a couple of weeks. So, bon dia Europa, ens avancem uns dies i ens veiem en el proper Cafè Europa dintre d'un mes, en concret el dia 28 de maig. Moltes gràcies a tots per seguir-nos. Fins la propera. Thank you so much.
Fins la propera. Gràcies.
Gràcies, bon dia.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.